Dust burst under Caleb Turner's boots as he dropped beside the ranch's last dying horse. Foam clung to the stallion's mouth, ribs sharp as fence wire. Caleb's left hand trembled, 2 fingers missing since the cattle raid that buried his brother. The horse collapsed harder, then a woman's voice cut through the wind. "Wait, don't let him die." A stranger stepped from the sagebrush. Sarah Redbird, travel-worn, eyes steady enough to face a storm. She knelt beside the dying animal, and Caleb Turner felt the prairie go still, because the woman saving his horse was about to change his life forever. Before we ride deeper into the story, hit subscribe, ring the bell, so you'll never miss another ride through the legends of the Wild West. Now, let's get back to the trail. The stallion lay heavy in the dust, breath shallow, foam clinging to its lips. Caleb Turner stood over the animal with the quiet patience of a man who had watched too many things die. The wind moved through the sagebrush, dry, endless. The woman beside the horse did not move. Sarah Redbird knelt in the dirt with both hands pressed along the animal's neck. Her fingers felt the pulse, slow, fading. "You're pressing the artery wrong," Caleb said. His voice was low, flat. She did not look up. "I know where the pulse is," she answered. The horse's ribs lifted once, twice, then settled again. Sarah leaned closer, brushing dust from the stallion's nostrils. The horse twitched under her touch. Caleb noticed, a small thing, but it mattered. The rancher shifted his weight. Boot leather creaked. The prairie stretched wide around them. Empty hills, faded fences. A ranch that had once held more horses than a man could count, now only silence. Sarah glanced at the saddle blanket lying beside the animal. She rolled it tight, lifted the horse's head gently, pressed the blanket beneath its jaw, supporting the neck. Caleb watched. "You done this before?" he asked. "A few times." The stallion exhaled slowly. Its breathing steadied just enough to notice. Sarah reached for Caleb's canteen, did not ask. She poured a thin stream of water along the horse's lips. Most of it spilled into the dust. Some reached the tongue. The animal swallowed. Caleb saw the movement, small but real. The rancher folded his arms. His left hand hung awkwardly, 2 fingers missing, old scars along the knuckles. Sarah noticed the hand. She said nothing. Instead, she pressed her ear against the stallion's ribs, listening. Wind rattled the dry grass along the fence. Far away, a hawk cried. Then Sarah stood. Dust clung to her dress. Travel stains, threadbare sleeves. "You've been running him too hard," she said. Caleb's jaw tightened. "He's the last breeding stallion on this ranch. That's why he's dying." Silence settled between them. The stallion stirred again, a slow kick of the leg. Caleb stepped closer. His shadow crossed the horse's flank. "You got family waiting somewhere?" he asked. "No." "You passing through town?" "No." Caleb studied her, travel bag by the fence, boots worn thin, a woman who had been walking for days, maybe weeks. The rancher turned toward the barn, old wood. Sagging roof, a place barely holding together. "You helped him breathe," Caleb said, "but he ain't saved yet." "I know." Sarah wiped her hands on her skirt. The wind lifted strands of her dark hair. "I need a place to work," she said. Caleb's eyes narrowed. "This ain't a boarding house." "I'm not asking for charity." She gestured toward the horse. "I'm asking for time." The stallion coughed softly. Caleb looked down at it, then back at her. "You fix him, you leave," Caleb said. "That simple." Sarah nodded once, but she did not move toward the road. Instead, she walked toward the barn. The horse tried to lift its head, failed. Sarah knelt again, adjusted the blanket beneath its neck. Her hands worked with quiet certainty. Caleb watched her for a long moment. Then he stepped toward the stallion. Together they lifted the animal, slow, careful. The horse staggered once, then again, but it stood, barely. The barn doors groaned open in the wind. Inside waited shadow, dust, and the faint warmth of shelter. Caleb led the stallion forward. Sarah walked beside the animal, steadying its shoulder. The prairie behind them fell silent. For the first time in months, the ranch did not feel completely empty. Morning came thin and gray across the ranch. Cold light slipped through the barn slats. Dust floated in it like old breath. The stallion stood in the far stall with its head low and its legs spread careful beneath it. Still alive, that was something. Sarah Redbird moved before sunrise, quiet, efficient. She carried 2 buckets from the pump, set one by the horse, then laid out strips of clean cloth she had washed in the dark and hung beside the stove to dry. The barn smelled of hay, old leather, and sickness slowly giving ground. Caleb Turner came in with a feed sack over one shoulder, big frame, hard shoulders, dark hair flattened from the wind. His coat hung open, and the morning chill did nothing to slow him. He set the sack down without a word. Sarah had already mixed warm mash in a shallow pan. Mash, salt, and a little molasses scraped from the bottom of a tin, not much, but enough to tempt life back into the animal. Caleb watched her slide the pan beneath the stallion's muzzle. The horse sniffed, flinched, then took one weak mouthful. Caleb's eyes stayed on the stallion, not on her. He ate. "Not enough," Sarah said. "He'll take more by noon if his fever breaks." Caleb gave a short nod, then he reached for the halter hanging on the peg. Sarah saw the hesitation, small but there. He caught the leather wrong with his left hand, the shortened grip, the missing fingers, the strap slipped. A soft thing, easy to miss. Not if a body had learned to watch pain before it spoke. Caleb caught the halter with his right hand and shoved it onto the peg harder than he needed to. The old wood cracked against the wall. Sarah turned back to the horse. She said nothing. That made him look at her at last. Most people stared, or tried not to. Either one was worse. She only lifted the stallion's lip and checked the gums, pale still, but stronger. Outside, a gate banged in the wind. The loose chain slapped wood. Caleb walked out to fix it. Sarah watched him through the barn opening. He moved like a man built for work and long used to doing it alone. He lifted the sagging gate with one arm and drove the pin home with the heel of his boot. No wasted motion, no softness. But when he straightened, he pressed his damaged hand once against his coat's seam. Brief, automatic. As if even pain had become routine. By noon, the sun warmed the yard enough to soften the frost around the trough. Sarah carried hot water from the kitchen and a tin of herbs from her travel bag. Crushed willow bark, a little horehound, dried mint. Caleb stood in the doorway of the house, watching her pass. The ranch house behind him looked like it had forgotten voices. One chair near the stove, another turned against the wall, a shelf missing 2 plates, though only one man lived there now. No curtains. No flowers, no sign of comfort except the fire he kept because cold could kill quicker than loneliness. "What's in the bag?" he asked. "Something for the fever." Caleb's jaw tightened. "That bag all you got?" She met his eyes. "All I kept." He did not ask from where. He did not ask from whom. He stepped aside and let her pass into the house for the kettle. Inside was warmer than the yard, but not by much. The room held the kind of order grief makes, everything in place, nothing touched unless needed. Sarah filled the kettle and set it over the fire. On the table sat a folded child's wool scarf, clean, mended at one edge, not something a rancher used, not something a man like Caleb would keep near unless it mattered. Her gaze rested on it 1 second too long. Caleb crossed the room and picked it up, not gently, not rough either, just fast. He shoved it into a drawer and closed it. The iron latch clicked. The sound stayed in the room. "You look at what helps the horse," he said. "I do." Sarah took the kettle before the steam grew wild. Back in the barn, she worked the herbs into the water. Caleb fetched more bedding for the stall without being asked. They moved around each other now with less friction, not trust, not yet, only rhythm. He lifted, she tended. He mucked the stall, she rubbed the horse's legs to wake the blood. A partnership built from necessity, that made it dangerous. Late afternoon brought hoofbeats on the north road. Both of them heard it. Caleb straightened first, still as fence stone. Sarah set down the cloth in her hand. The hoofbeats passed the outer line and slowed near the mailbox post. One rider, no hurry, just enough confidence to make a man dislike him before he ever spoke. Caleb stepped outside. Sarah stayed in the barn opening, shadowed by the door. The rider wore a town coat too fine for ranch work and gloves without dust on them. A narrow man, pale, clean-shaven. His horse was better fed than half the valley. He held an envelope. Turner, the rider called, message from Dry Creek. Caleb did not walk closer than he had to. The rider looked past him at the roofline, the corrals, the fading paint on the well house, taking measure. Men like that always were. Caleb took the envelope with his right hand. The rider's eyes flicked once to the left, to the missing fingers, then away. Too late. Tax notice. The rider asked with a smile too small to be friendly. Caleb said nothing. The rider touched his brim and turned out. Hoofbeats faded down the road. Sarah came to the porch while Caleb broke the seal. He read the paper once. Then again, his face did not change. That was how a person knew it was bad. Problem? She asked. No. He folded the paper sharp, put it into his coat, went back to the barn. That was answer enough. She followed him in. The stallion had kicked loose half the bandage from its foreleg, a small thing, but it gave them both something to do besides speak of the letter. Sarah crouched and reached for the torn cloth. The horse jerked hard. The pan of mash flipped, slopped across the dirt. The stallion stumbled sideways and struck the stall wall. Wood boomed. Caleb moved fast, one arm on the halter, shoulder against the horse's neck, holding all that fear in place with sheer weight and will. Now, he said. Sarah dropped under the horse's head and freed the twisted bandage. Her sleeve brushed Caleb's wrist. He held steady. The stallion shivered, then settled. For a moment the three of them were bound together by breath, hot animal breath, human breath, the scrape of boots in straw. Caleb's injured hand braced against the rail, white with strain. Sarah wrapped the leg again, tighter, cleaner. When she stood, Caleb was still holding the horse. His face was close enough for her to see the scar at his temple under the dark hair. Old, fine. The kind made by flying iron or a rifle butt. Let him go slow, she said. He did. The stallion stayed upright. Caleb stepped back. His left hand shook once, tiny, unwanted. Sarah reached for the water bucket and set it near him, not as help, as cover, a thing for his hand to do. He took it, that was all. At supper they sat across from each other in the small kitchen. Beans, cornbread gone hard at the edges, coffee black enough to pass for medicine. The fire snapped behind the stove door. Outside, the wind moved around the house corners like something looking for a way in. Caleb ate fast. Sarah ate steady, neither wasted words. Then his fork slipped when he cut the bread. His left hand failed the hold. The bread dropped back to the plate, a hard little sound. He set the fork down. Silence thickened. Sarah broke her cornbread with her fingers. No glance, no pity, only the easy act of making clumsiness ordinary. Caleb looked at her for a long moment. The raid was 5 winters ago, he said. He said it to the table, not to her. Men came after dark, wanted cattle. Wanted whatever else they could carry. The fire cracked. Sarah waited. My brother was faster with a rifle than me. He lifted the coffee cup, set it back down. He died anyway. His eyes stayed fixed on the grain of the wood. I kept the ranch, lost the hand. Not all the hand, he did not say that. The missing part said enough. Sarah took a drink of coffee. "The dead don't ask what you kept," she said. Caleb's gaze rose, slow. "No. They ask what you do with what's left." The room went quiet again, but not the same quiet. This one had shape, depth. Caleb leaned back in his chair, the hard line in him eased by 1 inch. No more, it was enough to notice. Night settled in. After supper, Sarah rinsed the dishes. Caleb split wood under the shed lamp. Each strike of the axe came even, measured, but near the end he missed the center line once. The blade glanced and bit the block crooked. He swore under his breath. Sarah heard it from the doorway. He saw her there. "I said you fix the horse and leave," he said. "That was the agreement." "There is no agreement yet." He pulled the axe free. "There don't need to be." "There does if I'm staying." Wind moved between them. The shed lamp hissed. From the barn came a low, restless sound from the stallion. Sarah stepped off the porch, stopped at the edge of lamplight. "You need help," she said. "I need the horse alive." "You need more than that." Caleb's mouth flattened. "Careful." She did not back down. That told him something he was not ready to name. "I need a place until spring roads open proper," she said. "My bag won't carry me through another month of sleeping under sky and brush." Caleb said nothing. Sarah went on. "I'll earn my keep, feed, laundry, mending, stock checks, horse care, whatever the ranch asks. And when spring comes, I go." Simple, clean, maybe even true. Caleb rested both hands on the axe handle, one whole, one altered. He looked past her toward the black line of the barn roof, toward the stallion fighting to live, toward the house that had felt too empty the moment she entered it. That was the danger, not the work, not the extra mouth, the presence, the sound of another cup set on the table, another pair of boots by the door, another living thing changing the air. "You stay till the horse can carry weight," he said at last. "No longer than 1 month." Sarah held his gaze. 1 month. "You work." "I do." "You don't ask questions I don't want answered." A beat, then she nodded. "You don't send me off in the night because you changed your temper." That nearly made him smile. Nearly. "I ain't a coward." "No," Sarah said softly, "you're not." The wind fell for a moment. A rare stillness crossed the yard. Inside the barn, the stallion stamped once and then grew quiet. Caleb set the axe aside. "Room off the kitchen," he said. "Door sticks in damp weather." Sarah looked toward the house, toward shelter, toward 1 month bought with labor and nerve. "That room have a window?" "Yes." "Then I'll take it." He gave one short nod and stepped past her toward the barn for one last check on the horse. She watched him go, the broad shoulders, the careful set of the left arm, the loneliness walking beside him like a shadow trained to heal. In the room off the kitchen, she found a narrow bed, a washstand, and a quilt folded with soldiers' corners. Nothing else. No welcome, no softness, still better than open ground. She set down her bag, opened the sticky window an inch. Cold night air came through carrying hay, smoke, and the far cry of a coyote. From the main room she heard Caleb move about the house, latch the back door, bank the fire, pause outside her room, then walk on. No words. In the barn, the stallion drank before midnight. Sarah heard the bucket ring softly against the stall rail. A small sound, a hopeful one. She lay awake under the quilt and listened to this strange house breathe around her. A man with a wound he would not show, a horse not yet dead, a month balanced on both. And somewhere beyond the Black Hills, trouble had already put a letter in Caleb Turner's pocket and sent it riding toward this ranch. By the third morning, the ranch sounded different, not louder, just lived in. A kettle began before sunrise. A broom moved across the kitchen boards. The back door opened and closed with purpose instead of habit. Caleb noticed all of it. He noticed the folded blanket Sarah left drying near the stove, the bucket she filled before he reached the pump, the way she had patched the torn curtain over the pantry shelf with thread pulled from her own hem. Small things. But a house made of small things could feel less empty than a town. Outside, the cold still bit hard. Frost silvered the fence rails. The barn roof smoked pale in the early light where the sun touched it first. Sarah crossed the yard with feed under one arm and a lantern in the other. Her boots were still worn thin. Her dress still plain, but she moved like she belonged to the work, not to the place, not yet. The stallion lifted its head when she entered the barn. That alone stopped Caleb in the doorway. 3 days ago the animal had looked half-buried already. Now its ears twitched toward the sound of her steps. Its eyes were clearer. It took grain from her hand without flinching. Caleb stepped into the stall and ran his palm down the horse's neck. Warm, alive. The fever had broken in the night. "He'll stand stronger today," Sarah said. Caleb gave one nod. The kind that carried more than thanks, because thanks had never sat easy in his mouth. He reached for the saddle blanket hanging on the rail. Sarah had washed it, brushed out the caked mud, mended the split seam near the corner. He looked at the careful stitches, then at her. "You didn't need to do that. It was torn." He set the blanket down again. That answer had no room to argue. By noon they were working the south fence line. The posts had leaned all winter. Half the wire sagged low enough for cattle to push through. Caleb drove staples with the hammer in his right hand and held tension with the left as best he could. Sarah walked the coil out behind him, straight, steady. When the wire snagged on sage roots, she freed it before he asked. When a post rocked loose in soft ground, she braced it with both hands while he packed earth and stone around the base. Work made its own language, the hammer strike, the hiss of stretched wire, the dry wind moving over the grass. Neither of them spoke much. They did not need to. At the far end of the drawer, a calf bawled from the brush. Thin, urgent, both turned at once. Caleb was already moving downhill before Sarah set down the wire coil. They found the calf half slid into a washout, one hind leg trapped between roots and shale. Its mother paced above the bank with wild eyes and foam on her muzzle. The calf kicked once, weak. Caleb dropped to one knee in the dirt and shoved his shoulder under the small body. The bank shifted. Loose stones skittered down. Sarah came in low from the side, talking soft to the cow, using her apron to wave the mother back just enough to keep from getting trampled. Caleb strained upward. The calf did not move. His left hand slipped on the mud-slick hide. Pain flashed across his face, quick, sharp, then gone. Sarah saw it anyway. She slid beside him, dug both arms under the calf's chest, and lifted with him on the count of breath instead of words. The roots tore free. The calf came up in a rush of dirt and shaking legs. It stumbled against Caleb's thigh. The mother surged in. Sarah caught Caleb's sleeve and pulled him clear before the cow's horn clipped his hip. For a second, all three of them stood in a whirl of dust, animal breath, and pounding blood. Then the calf found its feet and nudged under its mother. The cow's panic broke. She led it away uphill. Caleb stayed bent a moment longer, hand on his knee, breathing hard. Sarah wiped mud from her cheek with the back of her wrist. "You all right?" He straightened. "Fine." His voice came a little rougher than usual. They climbed back to the fence line. No more was said, but something had shifted. The kind of shift that happens when two people put their weight under the same burden and feel it rise. That evening, Sarah found an old coffee tin of nails, sorted it, and filled the worst gaps in the loose shelf above the stove. Caleb came in carrying wood and stopped when he saw the kitchen. The table had been scrubbed pale. The broken chair rung was wrapped tight with rawhide and set to dry by the fire. A small crock of rendered tallow sat near the lamp, useful, orderly, warm in a way the room had not known for years. He set the wood down more carefully than usual. "You keep changing things." Sarah looked over from the stove, where she stirred beans with dried onion and the last strip of salt pork. "I keep fixing what's broken." His gaze moved over the room, to the swept floor, the patched curtain, the second cup set out without ceremony beside the coffee pot, then to her, "Some things stay broken." Sarah returned to the pot. "Some do." No challenge in it, no sermon, just fact. That made him stay instead of walking out again. They ate with the door cracked to let out heat and cooking smoke. The sky beyond the threshold turned copper, then iron. Windmill blades creaked slow in the distance. The stallion stamped once in the barn, a strong sound now, not the weak scrape of before. Caleb broke cornbread and soaked it in the beans. Sarah mended a split work shirt beside her plate between bites. Domestic things, quiet things. Yet each carried a strange weight in that house. After supper, Caleb sat on the porch step and sharpened a drawknife with the whetstone balanced on his boot. Sarah brought out the folded laundry and set it on the bench. The dusk settled around them. Bats moved quick over the yard. Far to the west, lightning flickered soundless behind the hills. "Storm won't reach us," Caleb said. Sarah looked that way. "You say that like you know the sky personally." "I know this land." She smiled faintly. "Land changes." He did not answer, but after a while he said, "You always work this hard for strangers." She folded one of his shirts along the seams. "I work this hard where I mean to stay alive." A coyote called from the flats. Another answered. Caleb ran the thumb of his right hand along the knife edge. "Where'd you learn horse doctoring?" "My father traded with Army Scouts one season. One of them showed me how to pull fever down in stock." "You close with your father?" The question came so suddenly it almost seemed accidental. Sarah kept folding. "No." That was all. Caleb nodded once, as if he understood that a short answer sometimes meant the wound ran deep enough already. Hoofbeats sounded before full dark. Not one horse this time, two, coming from the north road, neither hurried, the sort of pace men used when they believed the ground ahead already belonged to them. Caleb rose before the riders cleared the cottonwoods. Sarah set the folded shirts aside. The yard changed all at once. What had been warm became exposed. What had been quiet sharpened. Two men rode in wearing town-cut coats and polished boots dusty only at the toes. The first was the same narrow rider who had brought the letter. The second man sat straighter, older, broad in the chest, clean-shaven, silver at the temples. His hatband was black silk, his gloves fine kid leather. He looked over the ranch the way buyers inspect cattle they intend to cull. No introduction was needed. Power announced itself without help. The older man reined in at the gate and let his gaze travel from the house to the barn to Sarah standing near the porch rail. Then back to Caleb. "Turner," he said. His voice was smooth, educated, used to doors opening ahead of it. "I am Victor Halbrook." Caleb did not step forward. "I know who you are." Halbrook inclined his head, as if that pleased him. "The county assessor tells me my office sent you notice. Your office sends a lot of paper, and your ranch answers very little of it." The narrow rider smiled at nothing. Sarah watched from the porch, still, unobtrusive, but she missed nothing. Halbrook's eyes touched the repaired fence line, the cattle pen, the barn doors, measuring again, always measuring. "This corridor north to Dry Creek is changing," Halbrook said. "Rail interests, cattle contracts, new passage roads. Men who cling to old claims are often hurt by progress." Caleb's face stayed empty. This land was my father's before you ever bought a necktie. The narrow rider laughed once under his breath. Halbrook did not. That may be so, he said. But old rights have a way of thinning when taxes lapse and surveys are corrected. A cold silence followed. Sarah saw Caleb's left hand curl once at his side, not toward a weapon, toward himself, holding the temper in. Halbrook looked at her then, not long enough. You have company, he said. Seasonal help, Caleb answered. Sarah felt the lie land in the yard and stay there. Halbrook's gaze returned to Caleb. I would settle matters privately if I were you. Public disputes cost more. Then he drew a folded paper from inside his coat and held it out. The narrow rider dismounted to deliver it. Caleb took it but did not open it. Halbrook gathered his reins. 1 month, Turner, he said. After that the county may decide the matter without your comfort in mind. He turned his horse. The second rider followed. Their hoofbeats faded into the dark. Only when they were gone did the night sounds return. A horse shifting in the barn, the porch board settling under Sarah's boot, the far hum of insects in the grass. Caleb looked down at the folded paper in his hand as though it carried rot. Then he walked past Sarah into the kitchen and set it on the table without opening it. She came in behind him. The lamp flame moved softly in the draft. That man wants your land. He wants everybody's land. He thinks he'll get this one. Caleb stared at the paper. On the outside was a county seal, fresh wax, official enough to frighten weaker men. Will he? Caleb did not answer at first. He reached for the coffee pot, found it empty, and set it back too hard. No. One word flat but not certain. Sarah saw that too. She untied her apron and hung it by the door. Then she picked up the paper, broke the seal, and unfolded it before he could stop her. He watched her eyes move across the lines. Survey revision, tax deficiency, right-of-way petition. Words meant to bury truth under stamps and signatures. When she finished, she laid the paper down carefully. This isn't just a tax notice. No, it's a pushy. Yes. The lamp hissed. Outside, the wind began again, rubbing dry branches against the house. Sarah touched the edge of the document with one fingertip. They mean to make you leave before they have to force you. Caleb looked toward the dark window over the sink, toward the barn beyond it, toward the stallion he had nearly lost, toward the house that had only just started to feel less hollow. His jaw tightened. They picked a poor month for it. Sarah followed his gaze. In the barn, the stallion let out a low, steady nicker, alive, stronger, a sound of returning strength. And in the little kitchen, with the lamp burning and the county paper between them, warmth met threat for the first time and knew it would have to fight to stay. Next morning broke hard and bright, no mercy in the light. It showed every weakness plain, the sag in the east corral, the gray weathering on the barn doors, the paper still lying on the kitchen table where Halbrook's seal had cooled and hardened in the night. Sarah rose before Caleb and fed the stove, coffee first, then oats, then the stallion. The horse met her at the stall rail now, not strong yet, but alert. Its coat had begun to shine again along the neck where fever sweat had once dried dull. She ran a brush over its flank in slow strokes. Dust lifted golden in the morning sun. Behind her, Caleb came into the barn carrying a saddle tree that needed mending. He set it on the bench and watched the stallion lane into the brush. He remembers who kept him breathing, Sarah said. Caleb grunted once, the closest thing he gave to agreement. Then he noticed the old ledger tucked beneath her arm, brown leather, cracked spine, barn dust thick in the seams. Where'd you get that? Top shelf, in the tack room. He took the brush from the nail and began working the horse's shoulder. Wasn't worth much. Sarah laid the ledger on the workbench and opened it. Careful, pages brittle with age, lists of births, brand counts, hay tallies, dates written in two different hands, one older and steadier, one later and hurried. "Maybe not to you," she said, "but men like Halbrook don't send papers unless papers matter." Caleb kept brushing, slow, even. "He's after land. Land is paper before it becomes dirt." That made him stop, not because he disagreed. Because he knew she might be right. Sarah turned another page, more entries, then a folded sheet slipped free and drifted to the floor, thin parchment, survey lines, a creek bend inked in blue, a ridge marked in red. Caleb bent to pick it up, but she was quicker. She spread it flat across the bench beside the ledger. The old map smelled faintly of oil and mouse nest. At the bottom sat a county stamp nearly rubbed away by time, and beside the western boundary, a notation in faded ink. Perpetual north grazing passage, stock movement exempt from corridor levy. Sarah read it twice. Then once more, Caleb leaned close, his shoulder warm against hers. "What is that?" Right." He frowned. "My father never said a word about it." Maybe he didn't know. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he trusted men not to steal what was written plain. She traced the line with one finger. "This corridor Halbrook wants. He can tax a new route. He can pressure a revised survey. But if your ranch holds original grazing passage through Dry Creek, he can't shut you out without tearing up county record." Caleb's face went still, dangerously still. "Or he's counting on me not knowing." Sarah looked up at him. "Yes." Outside, a hammering sound broke the moment. Sharp, urgent, someone at the front gate. Caleb rolled the map at once and slid it back into the ledger. He handed both to Sarah. "House, now." She tucked them under her arm and crossed the yard, while Caleb went to the gate. Old Mr. Blevins from the neighboring spread sat his mule like a sack of bent wire and worry. His hat was shoved back, his cheeks wind-burned. "Turner," he called, "you heard about the Morrow place." Caleb stopped short. "No." "Fence cut in the night, 12 head run off the draw." Sarah paused just inside the kitchen door and listened through the screen. Blevins spat dust. "Sheriff says could be drifters. I say drifters don't carry county wire cutters." Caleb's jaw hardened. Blevins lowered his voice. "Folks are saying Halbrook's men been riding lines after dark, not touching enough to hang a charge on, just enough to make holding on feel costly." The mule shifted. Leather creaked. Blevins glanced toward the house, toward the barn, toward signs of life different from before. "You got anything worth keeping, boy? Keep watch on it." Then he turned and rode out. Caleb stood at the gate long after the mule disappeared in the heat shimmer. Inside the house, Sarah laid the ledger and map on the kitchen table. When Caleb came in, she had already cleared the dishes aside and weighted the corners flat with a salt crock and coffee tin. He shut the door behind him. "Blevins hears too much. He also sees too much." Caleb came to the table. His finger hovered over the old boundary line. This enough to stop him? Not by itself. The answer settled heavy. She looked through the ledger again. Names, brands, transfers, season tallies. Then another notation caught her eye. County witness, Amos Pike recorder, repeated 3 times across different years. Who's Amos Pike? Caleb dragged a chair back and sat. Used to keep records in Dry Creek. Retired. Lives out near the Mission Road. Still alive. Main enough to be. Sarah almost smiled. Then he may remember this. Caleb leaned back. Wood creaked under his weight. He studied her over the edge of the table. "You start this, and Halbrook won't leave it at letters. He already is." He looked toward the window, toward the barn, toward the corral fences that could be cut in one night, toward the house that had begun to carry traces of 2 lives instead of 1. His voice came lower. "Could have kept walking when you found this place." Sarah folded the ledger shut. "Could have let your horse die." Their eyes held, longer this time, not a challenge, something quieter, deeper. Then Caleb rose. "We go see Pike tomorrow." The day turned hot by noon. Work still had to be done. Threat did not milk cows or mend rails. Sarah took the wash to the line while Caleb checked the north pasture and counted stock. Every small task carried new weight now. The ledger sat wrapped in a flour sack beneath the kitchen floorboard, the map hidden inside Caleb's coat when he moved about the yard. At supper he spoke little, more than before, less than most men. "Pike don't like strangers," he said. "I'm not asking him to like me. He hates questions. Then he'll hate tomorrow." A corner of Caleb's mouth moved, not quite a smile, enough to warm the room by a degree. After supper, Sarah darned socks beside the stove. Caleb sat at the table cleaning the revolver he had not touched since her arrival, cloth over steel, cylinder turning slow in his hand. The lamplight caught the scar on his temple and the missing fingers on his left hand where he steadied the frame. Sarah watched him. "You expecting trouble tonight?" "I'm done being surprised by it." That answer went through her like cold water, not because of the gun, because of the tiredness under the words. A man could get worn thin bracing for blows that had not landed yet. She set the sock aside. "Then I'll take first watch." His head came up. "No. You can't work all day and sit awake all night. I've done it before." "Yes," she said softly, "I know." Silence, then he snapped the cylinder shut. "We both sleep. And if someone comes..." He stood and crossed to the window, dark outside, only the faint silver of moonlight on the trough. "Then I hear them." Sarah did not answer. She simply rose, crossed to the peg by the door, and hung a lantern there full of oil and ready-struck matches beside it. Prepared, useful, Caleb watched her do it. Nothing in his face changed. But when he banked the fire later, he left the lantern where she had put it. Morning brought a low bank of clouds and a restless wind. They hitched the wagon just after dawn. Sarah wore her best plain dress under a work shawl. Caleb carried the ledger wrapped tight. The stallion stayed behind in the barn lot, not ready for road work yet, but strong enough now to toss its head and stamp when they passed. That small show of life pulled something in Caleb's face loose for one brief second. Then they rolled north toward Mission Road. The prairie opened around them. Dry grass. Red dirt, sky pressing low. They found Amos Pike in a crooked house behind a stand of cottonwoods, arguing with a hen that had somehow gotten onto his porch. He was stringy as old barbed wire and looked twice as stubborn. When Caleb named himself, Pike squinted as if insulted by youth. When Sarah spread the map across his porch table, he squinted harder. "Where'd you dig that up?" "Turner Ranch tack room," Sarah said. Pike bent over it. His finger shook only a little as he followed the faded line. Then he grunted. "I wrote that amendment myself." Caleb went still. Pike jabbed the page. Dry Creek flood took the Old South Run in '83. County granted Turner passage through the North Corridor permanent, provided stock counts stayed under registered head. Wasn't charity either. Paid proper for it. Recorded, Sarah asked. Pike shot her a look. "Girl, I was county recorder 17 years. I recorded my own breakfast if there was ink enough." Then there's a copy somewhere. Pike's eyes narrowed. Should be in Dry Creek Records Hall, unless some polished vulture tidied it away. Caleb's hands curled on the porch rail. Halbrook. Pike snorted. That man buys paper the way others buy bullets. Sarah leaned in. Would you testify if needed? Pike looked from her to Caleb and back. A dry little silence passed. Then he said, I testify for truth. Don't care whose boots it dirties. Hope is a dangerous thing when a person has gone without it. It can make the next blow land twice as hard. They reached home near sundown. The first sign was the crows. Too many, lifting black from the north pasture fence in a sudden flurry. Then the smell hit. Not death, smoke, old smoke, char and damp ash. Caleb snapped the reins and the team lunged forward. The wagon rattled hard over the yard. Sarah gripped the seat as the house rushed up, the barn beyond it, the corrals. And the east hay shed half blackened and collapsed. Caleb jumped from the wagon before it stopped rolling. He ran for the shed, boots pounding dirt. Sarah followed. The fire was out, had burned itself hungry hours ago, but the damage remained, charred posts. A roof caved in, 2 months of hay ruined under soot and wet ash. The air stank of scorched wood and singed feed. Caleb kicked through the wreckage, found the broken lantern first. Not one of theirs, cheap tin. Deliberately smashed. Then he saw the fence. The north side cut open clean, not burned through, cut. The cattle were gone from that pen, every last one. Sarah turned in a slow circle, taking it in. The blackened shed, the open gap, the drag marks where panicked stock had been driven hard, and on the barn door fixed at eye level with a knife, a strip of paper snapping in the wind. Caleb tore it free, 3 words, settle now, 1 month. Halbrook had signed nothing. He did not need to. Caleb's face changed then, not loud, not wild, something colder, more final, the kind of change that comes when grief and rage stop wrestling and begin working together. Sarah touched his sleeve. The horses. He was already moving. They ran to the barns. Inside, the remaining stock tossed and snorted, eyes rolling white from the smoke and the scent of strangers. But the stallion was there, alive, sweating, one flank scraped raw where it had battered the stall trying to break loose. Sarah got to him first, hands on the halter, voice low and steady. Caleb moved past her, checking latches, windows, the back tack door, open, forced, a boot print in spilled grain. He crouched once, touched the print, then rose. They came inside. The words were flat, that made them worse. Sarah pressed a cloth to the stallion's scraped side. He's shaken, not taken. They tried. Caleb stood in the center of the barn, with smoke-dark light falling through the slats across his shoulders. Around them, the animals slowly began to quiet under Sarah's touch and his presence. Outside, the ruined shed still smoldered in places where beams hid heat. Inside, the horse he thought he had lost once already breathed hard and lived. Sarah looked at Caleb, the man who had wanted only peace, only distance, only enough life left in him to keep the ranch standing one more season. That man was gone now. In his place stood someone harder, straighter, awake. Caleb turned toward the open barn door and the blackening sky beyond it. His voice came low. They touched my home. Then he looked at Sarah, not past her, at her, and now it's war. The fire still breathed under the wreckage when dawn came. Thin threads of smoke rose through the broken roof beams. The yard smelled of wet ash, trampled dirt, and fury held too long. Caleb Turner had not slept. He had spent the last dark hours with a shovel, a rifle, and a lantern. He buried the hottest coals under earth. He checked every latch twice. He walked the fence lines until frost silvered his boots. Now he stood in the cold gray morning beside the ruined shed, broad shoulders square, jaw set hard enough to crack stone. Sarah came from the barn with the stallion's halter rope coiled over one arm. The horse had settled near dawn. The scrape along its flank was clean and dressed. Alive, still here, that mattered. Caleb looked at the blackened timbers. Then at the open gap in the north fence where the cattle had been driven through. They took 18 head, he said. His voice was rough from smoke and night air. Sarah set the rope on the rail. Then we count what's left and keep moving. He turned toward her. For a second she saw the old instinct in him, the one that wanted to go alone, ride hard, settle things with fists, rifle smoke and blood in the dust. Then it passed, not gone, mastered. He looked toward the road instead. We go to town. Today. Before Halbrook buys another lie. That was the first choice. Not revenge, witnesses, not hiding, people. Sarah felt the air change in him, the same way a horse feels thunder before the clouds break. He was done standing inside his own grief like it was a fence line no one could cross. By sunrise, he had saddled the bay gelding and hitched the wagon for Sarah. He rode not as a man fleeing ruin, but as a man riding out to answer it. The difference showed in his spine, in the way he held the reins, in the revolver worn openly now at his hip. They stopped first at Blevins's place. Old Mr. Blevins came out before the wagon wheels had settled. His suspenders hung loose. His hat sat crooked. His eyes went straight to the smoke smear on Caleb's coat. Told me enough just seeing that, he muttered. Caleb did not waste words. Halbrook's men cut fence, burned hay, ran my cattle. Blevins spat. Same kind of work hit Morrow. He looked past Caleb to Sarah, then back again. You going to sheriff? I'm going to every man who still remembers whose ground this used to be. That brought Blevins up short. Caleb had never said things like that before, not out loud, not where they could travel. Blevins's gaze sharpened. Then wait. He went back inside and came out with his coat, a shotgun, and the stiff dignity of a man too old to be frightened into obedience. I'll ride behind. From there they stopped at the Morrow place, then at Jensen's Creek Spread, then the Widow Carver's small east parcel where Halbrook had already been pressing for a sale through taxes and legal notices. Each stop told the same story in different pieces. Cut wire, missing calves, survey papers no one remembered approving, men paid in town script to stir fear and call it business. By noon there were 6 riders trailing Caleb's wagon. Not an army, not even a proper posse, just neighbors, working people, tired people. The kind of people Halbrook counted on staying tired and separate. Sarah sat beside Caleb on the wagon seat and watched them gather, one by one, quietly, without speeches. That was how real things began on the frontier, not with declarations, with men showing up. They reached Dry Creek under a white noon sun. Dust drifted low through the main street. The blacksmith hammer rang from somewhere behind the feed store. The livery smelled of manure and hot iron. People looked up when they saw Caleb Turner come in with others at his back. They looked twice when they saw Sarah Redbird sitting beside him, straight-backed and calm, a leather ledger wrapped in cloth across her lap. Rumor had moved faster than the wagon. That much was plain. Sheriff Dolan stood outside the mercantile with one hand hooked in his belt and the other shading his eyes. A thick man, slow-moving, too comfortable in public. When Caleb climbed down, the sheriff gave a sigh like all of this was whether he had hoped might pass. Turner. Dolan. The sheriff's gaze moved over the riders, over the wagon, over the soot still dark on Caleb's sleeve. You bringing trouble into town. Caleb shut the wagon door with one hard motion. No. I'm bringing proof. Dolan's eyes narrowed. Proof of what? Sarah stepped down with the ledger in both hands. Fraud, intimidation, arson, stock theft. The sheriff's expression changed at that. Not much. Enough. A few people had drifted closer from the boardwalk. Mr. Kessler from the feed store, Miss Harlan from the post office, 2 drovers near the trough, a blacksmith's apprentice wiping his hands on his apron. The town was listening now. Dolan looked at Sarah as though annoyed by her certainty. Who are you? Someone who can read. Blevins snorted behind them. A few of the townsfolk smiled despite themselves. Dolan did not. This is county business, he said. Then let the county hear it, Caleb replied. That brought more stillness than shouting would have. Caleb was not a man given to public words. Everyone in Dry Creek knew it. So when he spoke, even a little, people leaned in. Sheriff Dolan glanced toward the courthouse. Small building, whitewashed, flag limp above it in the heat. He hesitated, not because he doubted what was happening, because he knew exactly what was happening and wished it were happening to someone else. Then a carriage rolled into view at the far end of the street. Gloss black wheels, matched grays, too fine for a cattle town. Victor Halbrook had arrived. He stepped down in a dark coat without dust enough on it to suggest honest use. Silver at the temples. No beard, his gloves pale, his expression composed, like a man attending a church social rather than a reckoning. Sheriff, Halbrook said, smooth as oil. Then his eyes moved to Caleb, to Sarah, to the riders behind them. Something cold flickered in that polished face. He had expected damage, not resistance. He had expected isolation, not witnesses. Sarah felt the ledger grow heavier in her hands. Halbrook saw it too, his attention sharpened. What is all this? He asked. Caleb took one step forward. The movement alone drew the street tighter around him. You burned my hay, stole my cattle, sent papers dressed like law. Halbrook removed one glove finger by finger, measured, unbothered. Serious accusation. It's the truth. Truth, Halbrook said mildly, is often what frightened men call change. There it was, the old weapon, dress theft in the language of progress, dress cruelty in the grammar of business. Sarah stepped up beside Caleb, close enough now that the townsfolk saw they stood together, not master and hand, not passing strangers. Together, she unwrapped the ledger and laid the brittle map across the hood of the sheriff's wagon. The paper caught the sunlight, faded lines, old county stamp, original notes in iron gall ink, perpetual north grazing passage, she said clearly, recorded under Turner ownership after the Dry Creek flood revision, witnessed and entered by Recorder Amos Pike. A murmur moved through the people gathered there. Halbrook's face did not break, but one pulse jumped at his temple. Sheriff Dolan leaned in despite himself. Pike's alive, he asked. Alive and willing to testify, Sarah said. Blevins spoke up from behind. So am I on the threats. Then Morrow, so am I on the cut fence. Then Widow Carver, voice thin but sharp enough to carry. And I on the tax notices sent before any county hearing. The street kept tightening. Truth has a sound when it gathers, not loud, certain. Halbrook set his hat on the carriage seat and smiled a little, too late. You people misunderstand procedure, he said. This corridor expansion. Sarah flipped the ledger open to the copied entries. Hay counts, stock counts, boundary references, the recorder's signature repeated. Then she drew out the second sheet from inside the back cover, a newer paper, one she had found tucked there before leaving the ranch that morning, not official, not meant for county eyes, a payment list. Initials, dates, amounts promised for fence work, night riding, and recovered stock. The name at the top was not Halbrook. Men like him never signed dirt directly. But the initials beside the sums belonged to his foreman, Elias Creed, and below that, in a tight, neat hand, one instruction: Turner pressure must remain deniable until surrender. Sheriff Dolan read it once, then again. His face went slack. He looked up at Halbrook. "That your foreman's writing." Halbrook's calm shifted half an inch. Anyone could have pennied that. "Maybe," Sarah said, "but not anyone knows Turner by name, Morrow by boundary marker, and the exact count of stock moved off the North Pen before sunrise." The apprentice blacksmith let out a low whistle. Kessler from the feed store muttered, "Lord above." Halbrook's driver took one quiet step backward, then another. The crowd noticed. Caleb did too. He did not raise his voice. He did not touch the gun at his side. He simply stood there in soot-dark clothes with the mark of smoke still on him and let the town see what had been done to his home. That was enough. Sheriff Dolan straightened slowly. His hand went to the folded paper list, then to the map, then to Halbrook. "You got answer for the fire." Halbrook's eyes hardened. No polish now, no softness, just cold power realizing it had lost the room. "You'd take the word of ranch scraps and an Indian drifter over mine." The silence that followed was deadly, because he had said it in front of everyone, had said the quiet thing aloud, had made plain what sort of man he was. Caleb moved then, one step, that was all, but it was enough to bring every eye to him. Sarah could feel the force in him like a heat from a forge, not wild, controlled. Dangerous because controlled. "She saved my horse," he said. Each word landed clean. "She saved my ranch. She found what you tried to bury. And any man here who insults her insults this ground and every decent hand that ever worked it." No one had heard Caleb Turner speak like that. Not ever, not for himself, never for anyone else. The words moved through the people like wind through dry grass. Something caught, something spread. Widow Carver came forward first, then Miss Harlan from the post office. Then Blevins planted his boot beside Caleb's and lifted his chin toward Halbrook as if daring him to challenge the whole valley at once. Sheriff Dolan drew a slow breath. "Victor Halbrook," he said louder now, for all the town to hear. "I am seizing these documents and opening inquiry into fraud, arson, stock theft, and criminal intimidation." Halbrook laughed once, a thin sound. "You haven't the backbone." Dolan's face reddened, maybe from shame, maybe from anger that it had been noticed. Either way it worked. He signaled to two deputies coming out of the courthouse, "Take his carriage, hold his foreman if he's in town, and send for Amos Pike." The deputies froze only a second before obeying. The street came alive all at once. Boots on boards, harness jingling, voices rising. Halbrook's control cracked there, not fully. Men like that did not break where others could see, but Sarah saw the moment his certainty died. He turned to Caleb with naked hatred. "This valley will regret choosing sides." Caleb looked at him the way a man looks at a snake pinned under a shovel. "No." He said it quiet, so quiet the whole street leaned to catch it. "You will." Halbrook was not dragged. That would have given him drama. Worse for a man like him, he was escorted, publicly, watched. His gloves gone, his carriage held, his name spoken in the same breath as theft and cowardice. As he was led toward the courthouse steps, townsfolk moved aside without respect. No bows, no hat tips, just space, cold and empty. The kind of emptiness power fears most. When it was done, the noise of Dry Creek returned slowly. Not normal, changed. The blacksmith hammer started up again. A wagon rattled past. Someone laughed from the hotel porch, shaky with relief. Blevins clapped Caleb once on the shoulder and nearly knocked his hat crooked. Widow Carver squeezed Sarah's hand so tight it hurt. Miss Harlan said there would be coffee at the post room if they wanted it. Ordinary things, warm things, the kind that return after fear loses its grip. Caleb stood beside the wagon in the sunlight, breathing like a man who had just come up from deep water. Sarah looked at him. at the broad chest, the hard face, the dark hair moving a little in the wind. The clean-shaven jaw set no longer in isolation but purpose. He looked different now, not because the scars were gone, because they no longer ruled the whole map of him. He turned to her. The street noise softened around them. For one rare moment, Dry Creek seemed far away, though it pressed on every side. "You should have left when this started," he said. Sarah held the ledger against her hip. "And let you fight alone." "Yes. No." A faint line moved near his eye, not quite amusement, not disbelief, something warmer, something harder earned. He looked past her toward the courthouse where Halbrook had vanished inside, then back to her. "The month ain't over." "I know." His gaze dropped briefly to her hand, still resting on the old ledger that had changed the balance of power, then rose again. "But now," he said, voice low and steady, "whatever comes next, you won't face it alone." And for the first time since she stepped out of the sagebrush and into his broken life, Sarah believed him. Morning came warm across the Turner Ranch, not the harsh light of winter, soft light, golden light, the kind that settled slowly over fences, barn roofs, and the open pasture beyond the cottonwoods. Caleb Turner stood at the corral rail with one boot hooked on the lower board, coffee in his hand, watching the stallion run. The horse had strength again, muscle along the neck, fire in the stride. Dust lifted behind its hooves as it circled the pasture and tossed its head against the wind. Weeks ago, that animal had lain in the dirt with death already breathing down its throat. Now it moved like the land belonged to it. Caleb watched in silence. Then he heard the kitchen door open behind him. Sarah Redbird stepped onto the porch with a basket of laundry against her hip. Morning light caught the loose strands of her dark hair. She paused at the top step, watching the horse, then watching him. "He looks proud of himself," she said. Caleb took a slow drink of coffee. "He earned it." She walked down to the line beside the well and began hanging shirts in the breeze. The ranch sounded different now, cloth snapping on the line, chickens scratching beneath the wagon, a hammer tapping somewhere near the rebuilt hay shed. Life noises, not the hollow quiet that used to sit over the place like a winter cloud. Caleb finished his coffee and set the cup on the rail. He crossed the yard slowly. The stallion slowed when it saw him coming, ears forward, curious, trusting. Caleb opened the gate and stepped into the pasture. The horse walked toward him without hesitation. Sarah watched from the clothesline. The wind moved gently through the cottonwoods. Spring had arrived proper now, grass showing bright between the old yellow stubble, the creek running louder than it had in years. Caleb rested his palm on the stallion's neck. The animal leaned into the touch, strong, alive. He ran his hand along the scar on the horse's flank where the scrape had healed. The stallion flicked its ear, satisfied. Across the yard, Sarah finished the last shirt and shook out the wrinkles before pinning it. Then she noticed something, a small shape moving along the fence near the barn. A young foal, thin legs, curious eyes. It belonged to the widow Carver down the road, born only a week before. The little animal had wandered through the open gate while Caleb worked the pasture. It stood uncertain in the dust, not sure whether to run or stay. Sarah walked toward it slowly. The foal watched her, still, then it stepped forward, one careful hoof at a time. Caleb noticed and leaned on the rail. "Looks like we got company." Sarah reached out and rubbed the foal's nose. Warm breath puffed against her hand. "Looks like someone's already decided this is home." Caleb watched the small horse circle the yard. Then he looked at Sarah, really looked, at the calm way she moved, at the quiet strength in her shoulders, at the way the ranch seemed to settle around her like a place that had been waiting. He stepped out of the pasture and closed the gate. The stallion trotted off into the grass behind him. Sarah turned when she heard his boots. "You left the gate open," she said lightly. "I didn't." She gestured to the foal wandering near the well. "Someone did." Caleb glanced at the animal, then back at her. Maybe it came looking. "For what?" He didn't answer right away. The wind carried the smell of fresh grass and sun-warmed wood through the yard. Caleb walked to the porch and rested one hand against the post. His other hand, missing 2 fingers but steady now, hung relaxed at his side. He looked across the land, fences standing straight, barn doors wide, smoke rising gently from the kitchen chimney. The kind of quiet that only comes after a long fight has finally ended. Then he looked at Sarah again. "Family," he said. She held his gaze. The foal nudged her arm, searching for milk that wasn't there. She laughed softly and brushed its mane back from its eyes. "That's a big word for a ranch this size." Caleb stepped down from the porch and crossed the yard. He stopped beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "This ranch was too big for one man," he said. Sarah studied him, the man who once stood alone beside a dying horse, the man who had nearly let the world shrink down to grief and silence. Now the ranch breathed around him, warm, alive. She reached out and took his rough hand, even the damaged one. "It isn't one man's ranch anymore," she said. The foal wandered off toward the barn. The stallion lifted its head in the pasture, and the Turner Ranch stood quiet beneath the wide western sky. Not lonely, not broken, just home. If this story stirred a memory or two, saddle up with us again. Hit subscribe and help this old frontier tales alive. Out here, every name, every trail, every sunset still matter. So till we meet again, friend, keep your hat tipped to the past and your heart pointed west.